In the world of horror, there are many movies that give you strange and off putting performances to varying success. But in my opinion, no horror movie has done this as good as 2017's The Killing of a Sacred Deer. And it's not just the performances either, the scene shifts are sudden and constant, while the music and cinematography make most of the scenes themselves uncomfortable. The movie is long, with tons of dialogue and seemingly pointless scenes, but by the end, you can feel how intentional every interaction within it is. The horror is very unique. There is no villain actively pursuing the characters, and while the horror is present, it's not something you ever physically see, forcing you to feel it through the lives of the characters. The score is great. It does a lot of heavy lifting to create the constant and foreboding tension you feel throughout. I expect if you haven't seen this movie, you've at least seen a video or a screenshot of the final scene from one of the Twitter interaction farming AI bots, which does give away the movie to some extent. But the story itself isn't the most compelling part of the movie, so as always, I recommend you checking it out to experience it for yourself. But if you're still here, let's get into it. The movie starts off with seeing the focal character, Steven, finishing up a surgery and talking to a colleague named Matthew about getting a new watch. Matthew says he can probably get him a discount on one, and the scene ends before we jump ahead and see Steven grabbing some lunch with a teenager named Martin. After lunch, Steven gives him a gift, his old watch. Martin asks if he can give him a hug, but not actually caring about consent gives Steven one anyway. There's a weird tension here, but we jump ahead and see Steven having dinner with his family, who Martin is seemingly not a part of. The family is comprised of Steven's wife Anna, their daughter Kim, who enjoys singing and is in choir, and their youngest son Bob, who we really only learn Steven wants to get a haircut. They seem to get along normally and live in a big house, maybe a little too perfect because no one seems really natural in this movie. Even after dinner, Steven and his wife have some alone time, and we see he has a fetish for unresponsive women. This is weirdly relevant later, or I wouldn't have brought it up. The next day, Steven walks into work and sees Martin is there, but Steven is displeased as he told Martin before not to come to his work without calling. A colleague from earlier approaches the two, and Steven introduces Martin to Matthew, explaining he is one of his daughter's friends and he ran into him and his parents at the mall last week. He says Martin wants to be a cardiologist like himself, so he brought him in so he could see what it's all about. We know he's clearly lying, as he was just upset with Martin being there. Later in the day, we see Steve giving a speech at a big dinner, talking about the advancements in medicine and procedures, showing he plays a pretty big role in the hospital. Afterwards, we see Matthew offer Steven a celebratory drink, where Anna answers for him and says he hasn't had a drink in 3 years. Normally, something a movie does not go out of its way to bring up unless it's going to be important. In the morning, Martin and Steven are talking again, and Steven invites him over to meet his family someday, and then we jump ahead to that day, with Martin being at their house. He ended up bringing a gift for everyone in the family, and we see Martin and Kim exchanging some glances, showing that they might have an interest for each other. The three non-parents at this get-together are all hanging out in Anna's room now, where we get some very normal dialogue.
Have you got hair under your arms yet?
Yes.
I just got my first period.
Before Martin asks if he can smoke, where Kim says yeah, as long as he does it by the window. Martin is 16, so he's getting started young, but the scene ends with some more very natural dialogue.
Can you show me the hair under your arms?
Sure.
And Martin and Kim go for a walk alone. Now we see that Martin has given Kim a cigarette, and she's smoking it while singing for him, showing they definitely have formed some sort of bond. After Martin has left, Anna starts asking Steven how he met him and how his father died. Steven responds that his father died instantly in a car crash, and Martin has been a patient of his for years. The two are getting ready for bed, and Martin calls Steven and says he wants to return the favor for inviting him over by inviting him over tomorrow night. Side note, earlier Martin says he lives in a not-so-nice neighborhood, and I've been to my fair share of bad neighborhoods. What about this image says bad neighborhood to you? These houses are pretty good size and clean. At the dinner with Martin and his mom, Martin suggests watching a movie, but Steven says he can't be out late because he didn't let his wife know he would be late. Martin and his wife basically insist on him staying, which is funny because this happens.
How do you know I'm not God?
I think I'll go to bed. Good night. Good night, Martin.
After Martin goes to bed, we see his mom flirting with Steven. He does not reciprocate this, but we get some important exposition where we find out she was visiting her husband in the hospital where Steven was taking care of him, showing he lied to Anna about Martin's father dying instantly in a car crash. The scene grows increasingly awkward as Martin's mom starts sucking on Steven's fingers.
But I won't let you leave until you've tried my tart.
And Steven just gets up and leaves, not wanting to disrupt his perfect life with his family and his wife. The next morning, Martin is in Steven's office, continuing to push Steven's boundaries. He uses the excuse that his heart hurts and that the disease that killed his father is hereditary. He expresses concern because nobody expected his father to die in surgery, giving us a lot more information about who Martin actually is than we have been given so far. Stephen runs some tests on Martin, and afterwards Martin inquires about Stephen's body hair, where he decides to choke him, and then Martin invites him back over for dinner. Stephen turns him down, and Martin presses, saying that his mom will be disappointed, and that he thinks they'd be perfect together, and also says his mom has a perfect body. An odd little critter this guy is. Stephen reminds Martin he's married and tells him that his tests are fine and that he is healthy and he can go home. In the next scene, we see Stephen over at Matthew's house, clearly bothered by something, I'm assuming the interaction he had earlier in the day, and we get a call from Martin, who has been waiting for Stephen at the diner they had gotten lunch at earlier in the movie. Martin, very upset Stephen isn't there. Stephen tells him he won't be able to make it, causing Martin to become increasingly irate before Stephen ends the call. That night, Kim comes home and says this.
Dad, you know who I saw today?
Who, darling?
Martin.
Showing things are getting increasingly weird. Stephen calls Martin, and we see Martin ignore the call while sitting outside of the family's home staring in. The next morning, Stephen goes up to get Bob ready for school, and Bob says he can't get up. His legs are numb, and he can't move them. Anna and Stephen take him to the Brain and Spine Center to start some tests. Afterwards, we see Bob walking fine, but halfway through their exit from the hospital, he collapses. He's taken back inside, where even further testing is done, but the hospital cannot find anything wrong with him and deciding to keep him in the hospital overnight to be safe. While all this is going on with Bob at the hospital, we actually see Kim is getting a ride home from Martin again, Kim clearly enamored by him. In the morning, they go to check on Bob, and Martin is in the room. After some casual conversation, Martin whispers to Stephen to meet him in the cafeteria. This is not a request, but a demand. When they meet in the cafeteria, Martin gives Stephen a gift, a Swiss Army knife, and then drops this bomb on him.
Yes, it's exactly what you think. Just like you killed a member of my family, now you gotta kill a member of your family to balance things out, understand?
He tells him if he doesn't choose who to kill, one by one everyone in his family will experience paralysis, refusal of food, bleeding from the eyes, and then death. Martin then apologizes for keeping him, and then tells him he only has a few days to decide. Stephen doesn't actually respond to this, as we just see Martin's being taken out of the hospital by security. After this, Stephen goes up to check on Bob, where we find out he is refusing to eat. This is causing Stephen to become irate, as what he was just told this is what would happen, and he tries to force feed him. This doesn't work, and Stephen storms off. Later on, we see Kim and Martin cuddling before he asks if she's on her period. Then Kim says no and starts to undress. He tells Kim she's the prettiest girl he's ever met, but he has to go. Kim then tells Martin she loves him, and they embrace before Martin leaves. We jump through some scenes where doctors are running more tests on Bob, and he still isn't eating. This comes to a boiling point where Stephen tries to make Bob walk, and this results on Bob flopping down multiple times. Eventually, Stephen tries to get Bob to tell him a secret with a game, where he says whoever tells the best secret wins. Bob agrees, and Stephen tells a story so insane, I don't know how many people on the planet are one-upping this.
When my father had had a lot to drink, and he was sleeping in the bedroom, put my hand on his and started stroking it until he ejaculated.
Like, save this for the fourth quarter, dog. Bob hasn't even given you a secret yet. On top of this, Bob then just tells Stephen he doesn't have any secrets, so Stephen just let that rip for fun, basically. Stephen trying to get Bob to admit him not walking or eating is an act, and threatens him that if it ends up being an act, he will shave his head and make him eat his hair. And honestly, after what he just told Bob, I believe this guy will do anything. In the morning, we see Stephen hasn't left the hospital, sleeping at his desk. Him and Anna decide to go up to visit Bob, but at the same time, while Kim is at choir practice, she becomes afflicted with the same paralysis as Bob, and now the two siblings are hospitalized next to each other in the same room, and Kim is refusing to eat. Stephen drives to Martin's house and pounds on the door. After no answer, he says,
Open the door or I will smash it down and I will fuck you and your mother just the way you want it!
I haven't even recovered from his last act of deviancy, so I need him to dial it back just a little bit. The next scene, we get the full exposition dump of Martin and his father, Anna confronting Stephen, where we find out Stephen had been drinking during Martin's father's heart surgery where he died. He says that the drinking had nothing to do with his death, but after lying about it for so long, we know him not to be a reliable narrator. Bob is asking when the two kids can go home, but Kim is asking if Martin had visited while she was sleeping. He hadn't, but calls her and says he won't be coming up to see her. He does tell her, however, to get up and look out of the window and she'll be able to see him. This actually results in her standing up, showing Martin has a very large amount of influence over the situation. When the call ends, Kim loses her ability to walk again, and Anna tells her she never wants her to talk to Martin again. Kim tells her mom that soon she won't be able to walk either, but she will get used to it. Anna now goes to Martin's house where Martin does answer. He tells Anna that ever since he killed his dad, Steven has been flirting with his mom constantly. Anna basically doesn't respond to this, but says she doesn't understand why her family has to pay the price for a mistake that her husband may have caused. He doesn't respond directly and goes into a long-winded story, the moral of the story being that him finding out he had been misled in a situation actually made him more upset than he was when he found out his father had died. I think the movie is telling us here that Martin is causing the situation because he feels like Steven led him on by treating him like a son. He thought one day he could be his actual dad, but Steven was likely playing along out of guilt. And when Steven started becoming more distant and Martin realized he had been led on, he started this curse or whatever is going on. He finishes by saying he's not sure if what is happening is right, but it is the closest thing to justice he can think of. The day ends with the hospital director saying he doesn't think there's anything else he can do for the kids, so they can go home if that's what they want to do. In the morning, Anna is with Matthew at a diner, asking if he was the anesthesiologist for Martin's father's operation. He doesn't really give up any information, as he says he doesn't know what he would really get out of from divulging it. She replies,
"What you didn't get that day we came for lunch at your house."
And they get into it in a car. Afterwards, he reveals Steven had 2 drinks before the surgery, but also says that wasn't really unusual for him back then. But we basically already had this information, so Anna kind of just did this for nothing. But we jump to the kids being hooked up to IVs in their home rather than the hospital now. Anna, upset, confronts Steven, saying they're in this situation because of him. He says if Martin was telling the truth, wouldn't she be already paralyzed, as he did say that everybody in the family would be afflicted with this. But Anna counters by saying so they should just wait till everybody's dying to actually do something. The two go to bed upset, but the next day Steven wants to show Anna something in the basement, where he has Martin tied to a chair, beaten, and bruised. Martin explains all of this is just a waste of time, as nothing's going to change until he kills one of his family members. An eye for an eye. We see Kim upstairs, smoking, and she has explained the situation to Bob, likely hearing it already from Martin. She apologizes, saying she's going to live with Martin, and basically being like, yeah, Dad's in a tough position, so I'm sorry, he's gonna have to kill you, Bob. She also says,
So I'd like to ask you a favor. Can I have your MP3 player when you're dead? Please, please, please.
To end everything off and relax, dude. Bob crawls to the living room and starts cutting off his hair, as Steven has expressed how much he doesn't like it when he grows his hair out throughout the movie. A really sad scene, as this is basically him pleading with his father to kill his sister instead of him. He then crawls to his dad and says he's going to go water the plants, as it's one of his chores and that he really wants to be a cardiologist. This is the breaking point, as Steven carries Bob back to bed and we see Steven sobbing outside as he has finally come to terms with the situation. We get a scene that I know isn't supposed to be funny, but Steven goes to their school to hear about the grades and behavior of them, as if that's going to help with the decision. Like, if the principal was like, yeah, Kim is not very good at math, was he just going to go home and kill her? Back home, we see Anna tending to the wounds Steven had inflicted on Martin. He tells her if they're going to do something, they should do it fast, as Bob is about to die. That night, we see Anna doing her way of pleading with Bob to not kill her, where she strips naked and lays there unresponsive, just the way we saw he likes her earlier. He does not reciprocate this, because obviously now is not the time, and she snuggles up next to him and says,
I believe the most logical thing, no matter how harsh this may sound, is to kill a child.
Because they can just have another kid. Kim tried crawling away from the house after pleading with Martin to make her better so they can run away together, but he explains it doesn't work that way. So she gives up and just tries fleeing, but the parents drive around and eventually find her to bring her back to the home. In the morning, Bob's eyes have started bleeding, which means the end is near and a decision needs to be made. The family at this point is a shell of what we saw earlier, where it's idealistic and everybody was happy and content, torn apart by this curse put upon them. All pitted against each other while Steven has to make the ultimate decision, which happens in the scene this movie is probably most known for. Anna, Kim, and Bob are all bound in the living room with bags over their head on different pieces of furniture. Bob loads his rifle, covers his eyes, and spins before firing. He repeats this until the decision has been made. Sometime later, we see the family at the diner Steven had been going to with Martin, with Anna and Kim. Martin comes in, and the only one who acknowledges him is Kim, with what I read as disgust. The family gets up and leaves the diner, leaving Martin alone, and the movie ends. This movie is a hard watch at some points, mostly I'd assume intentionally, but also because of the brutally slow burn. It's almost 40 minutes before something actually happens, but almost all of that 40 minutes prior are relevant to the bigger picture. I've seen this movie in the past and was truthfully getting bored, thinking to myself that I actually like this movie, before the gears shift and it reels you right back in, letting you put everything together and seeing how intentional everything they show you is. I don't talk about a ton of the scenes in this movie because it's 2 hours long. However, compared to most movies with a very slow build-up, it almost all pays off in the end. So I highly recommend checking it out because I said earlier, knowing what happens does not change the effectiveness of this movie. I would say it's almost as enjoyable on the second watch as it is on the first. That's all for this one. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe. I've been Kali, and I'll see you in the next one.